It is April 1945. The war is almost over. But somewhere beneath the frozen waters of a German lake, 70 tons of gold simply vanish. No trace, no witnesses, no answers, just silence. And 80 years later, it's still out there. The Third Reich was dying. Everyone knew it. Allied forces were closing in from the west. The Soviets were tearing through the east. Berlin was burning. And Adolf Hitler, locked inside his bunker, was issuing orders to a Germany that no longer existed. But somewhere above the chaos, somewhere in the mountains and the forests and the deep black lakes of Bavaria, a secret was being buried. A secret worth billions. To understand what happened to the gold, you have to understand where it came from. Because this wasn't just Germany's gold. It was stolen gold, looted gold, gold ripped from the hands of millions of people who would never get it back. When the Nazis swept across Europe, they didn't just conquer nations. They pillaged them. They stripped the central banks of Poland, Belgium, the Netherlands, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and France. They stole priceless artwork, diamonds, silver, foreign currency. And they melted it all down. Coins, jewelry, wedding rings, even the fillings from the teeth of concentration camp victims. All of it melted into gold bars stamped with a Nazi eagle and stacked inside the vaults of the Reichsbank in Berlin. By 1939, the Reichsbank held reserves worth nearly $1 billion. In today's money, that is almost $20 billion. And as the war dragged on, the looting only accelerated. SS units operated like organized crime syndicates, stripping entire countries down to the bone. The man overseeing all of it was Walter Funk, the Reich Minister of Economics. He smiled in photographs. He wore fine suits. He was one of the most dangerous men in Europe. By late 1944, Funk and the senior Nazi leadership faced a terrifying reality. Berlin was going to fall, and when it fell, the gold would fall with it, into the hands of the Allies, or worse, the Soviets. That could not be allowed to happen. So in February 1945, a secret operation began. An operation so sensitive that only a handful of men knew its true scope. The gold had to move. On the night of February 3rd, 1945, a convoy of heavy trucks rolled out of Berlin. No lights, no markings. Armed SS escorts rode alongside them. Inside the vehicles were wooden crates, and inside those crates were gold bars, foreign currency, and bags of jewels worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The convoy moved south toward the Bavarian Alps because Hitler had a plan, a final redoubt, a fortress in the mountains where the Reich would make its last stand. The gold was going there first. The convoy reached Merkers, a small town in Thuringia. And this is where the first shocking twist of this story begins. Because not all the gold made it to the mountains. Some of it was hidden underground, inside a salt mine, the Kaiseroda mine to be exact. And when American soldiers of the 90th Infantry Division stumbled across it on April 4th, 1945, their jaws dropped. Miles of tunnels, crates stacked to the ceiling, gold bars glittering under flashlight beams. Over 100 tons of gold, hundreds of millions in foreign currency. Masterpieces by Rembrandt, Manet, and Dürer. General Dwight D. Eisenhower himself came to inspect it in person. He stood there, in a mine shaft, surrounded by the entire stolen wealth of a continent. But here's what no one talks about. That was only part of it. The Merkers discovery was enormous, but the convoy hadn't stopped there. The rest kept moving, south, deeper into Bavaria, and the trail grows darker from that point on. The man tasked with moving the remaining treasure was Ernst Kaltenbrunner, head of the Reich Security Main Office, one of the most feared figures in the entire SS. He was tall, scarred, utterly merciless. He reported directly to Heinrich Himmler. And in the final weeks of the war, Kaltenbrunner was doing something strange. He was disappearing into the mountains, meeting with local officials, ordering excavations, moving trucks at night. People who asked questions stopped being seen. The gold was heading for the Obersee region near the town of Reit im Winkel. Some accounts point to Lake Toplitz in Austria. Others point to the deep waters of Lake Walchensee in Bavaria. In May 1945, a German army paymaster named Friedrich Rauch was reportedly part of a group that sank crates into the Walchen Sea under cover of darkness. Rauch later told investigators the crates contained gold coins and currency. He described the exact coordinates. Divers went in. They found almost nothing. A few coins, some rotting wood, and then the investigation was quietly shut down. Why? Why would you shut down a search for billions in stolen gold? That question has haunted researchers for decades. And the answer, when you start pulling at the thread, is deeply uncomfortable. Because some of that gold didn't just disappear. It was used. The ODESSA network, a shadowy organization of former SS officers, operated throughout the late 1940s. Its purpose was to help war criminals escape justice. Ratlins, they called them. Underground routes through Austria and Italy, funded by sympathetic Catholic clergy, corrupt officials, and stolen Nazi gold. Former SS men walked into new lives in Argentina, Brazil, Syria, and Egypt. Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Lion. Joseph Mengele, the angel of death. They didn't vanish on luck alone. Someone funded their escape. Someone paid for the false documents, the safe houses, the transatlantic passage. And in 1999, a Swiss bank settlement confirmed what investigators had long suspected. Hundreds of millions in looted gold had flowed through neutral countries during and after the war. Switzerland, Portugal, Spain, Sweden. Banks that asked no questions. Transactions that left no paper trail. The gold was being laundered in real time, even as the bodies were still being counted. But not all of it moved that way. Some of it, historians believe, is still hidden, physically buried, underwater, underground, waiting. The German landscape is riddled with wartime hiding spots. Bunkers, tunnels, mine shafts, force caches. Since 1945, over 3,000 discoveries of hidden Nazi assets have been made across Europe. 3,000. And experts estimate those represent perhaps 10% of what was actually concealed. In 2015, a bombshell announcement out of Poland. 2 men, one Polish and one German, claimed to have found a Nazi gold train buried beneath a hill near the city of Voljic. Using ground-penetrating radar, they said they had located a train 150 meters long hidden inside a secret tunnel. The train, according to legend, had left Breslau in January 1945 carrying gold, gems, artworks, and weapons. The Polish government mobilized. Geologists were sent in. The military was put on standby. The world held its breath. Then nothing. The tunnel was empty, or so the official report said. But witnesses in the region speak of strange things. Of ground subsidences, of men digging at night near the hill in recent years, of local officials who seem nervous when the subject comes up. The mystery of the Voljic gold train has never been fully resolved. Not officially, not convincingly. And then there is Lake Toplitz, perhaps the most haunted body of water in Europe. Tucked inside the Austrian Alps, surrounded by sheer cliff faces, nearly impossible to access by land. The SS used it as a testing ground for experimental torpedoes in the final years of the war. But in the final days, they used it for something else. In May 1945, witnesses saw convoys arriving at the lake. They saw crates being dropped from wooden platforms into the ice-cold water. They saw the men leave. They never came back. In 1959, a West German magazine funded a diving expedition to Toplitz. They recovered something extraordinary. Hundreds of millions of pounds in forged British banknotes. A secret Nazi project called Operation Bernhard. The plan had been to flood Britain with fake currency and destroy its economy. The operation failed, but the evidence sank to the bottom of the lake. The divers also found printing equipment. They found documents, but they found no gold. And one of the divers died during the search. An accident, it was ruled, in a lake with no dangerous currents and no wildlife. An accident. Subsequent expeditions in 1963, 1983, and 2000 retrieved more forged currency, more Nazi documents, and more questions. The lake floor is covered in fallen logs, the result of wartime timber work, creating a natural barrier that makes deep searching almost impossible. Almost. Because in 2000, CBS News partnered with a research team and sent in remotely operated cameras. They found items that could not be fully identified at depth. The Austrian government then stepped in and banned all future diving in the lake. Permanently, a lake that might hold billions in stolen gold, with one confirmed death during a search, sealed off by government order. You are allowed to wonder about that. You should wonder about that. The total amount of gold still unaccounted for from the Nazi era is, depending on who you ask, somewhere between 200 and 400 tons. At today's gold prices, that is between $12 and $24 billion. Some of it was laundered. Some of it funded escape networks. Some of it was quietly absorbed by neutral nations who have never fully accounted for their wartime transactions. And some of it simply sits there, in the dark, in the cold, in the deep water of an Alpine lake that no one is allowed to enter. The victims of this theft were never fully compensated. The families of Holocaust survivors have fought for decades through international courts and diplomatic negotiations. Some settlements were reached, symbolic amounts, fractions of fractions. The Swiss banks paid out $1 billion in 1998, $1 billion against the $20 billion that was taken. The mathematics of justice, in this case, do not add up. What makes this story so haunting isn't just the gold itself. It's what the gold represents. Every bar, every coin, every melted ring was once someone's life. Someone's savings, someone's grandmother's necklace, someone's child's inheritance. And it was taken with industrial efficiency by a regime that had perfected the art of reducing human beings to assets to be processed. 80 years on, historians keep searching. Divers keep looking at restricted Alpine lakes on satellite maps. Amateur treasure hunters file permit requests that get denied without explanation. And governments sit on archives that have been partially declassified but never fully opened. The gold is out there. Most people who study this seriously believe that. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to change the story one more time. Enough to force one more reckoning. Enough to remind the world that history doesn't end when the war does. It ends when the last secret surfaces. And this one hasn't.